This is the Guns Magazine podcast, Guncranks edition, number 73. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. But before we get started, let's talk about our sponsor, Berger Bullets. Berger builds match-grade rifle bullets and ammunition for target, hunting, and tactical shooting applications. Proudly made in Mesa, Arizona, Berger uses the highest quality materials, tooling, and production processes to produce the world's most accurate bullets and ammunition. Berger's unequaled by the competition and has established more long-range world records than all other manufacturers combined. To find out why our nation's elite operators, competitive shooters, and hunters all trust Berger to shoot better, visit your favorite retailer to experience Berger's uncompromising quality or learn more at burgerbullets.com. Well, like a bad penny, the Guncranks are back. The last episode of the Guns Magazine podcast each month will be given to the Guncranks. Myself, Tom McHale, the editor of American Handgunner, and Roy Huntington, our now retired boss. We've had lots of cards and letters about the Guncranks, but we're going to disregard all that and keep doing the show. Today, we're doing a deep dive into gun cleaning. It's one of those topics everybody's got an opinion on, and every once in a while, some of them are right. In this episode, we're hitting on using margarine for your gun, the secret ingredient in Hoppe's gun solvent, how to clean up oil-soaked stocks, and where you shouldn't store your sunflower seeds. Now, we're back in session with the Guncranks. Well, good morning, gentlemen. The Guncranks are in session.
That's a scary thing to think about.
Yes, it is. Well, welcome to our second in the hopefully continuing an ongoing series at the last podcast, Guns Magazine podcast of every month. We're getting the guys back together. We're getting the band back together, and we're going to do the Guncranks podcast. So I appreciate Roy Huntington and Tom McHale taking time out to get the band back together, and we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. So our topic of the day, we recently did a short video that hopefully will be coming out soon. We were talking about cleaning, and we realized we really need to take a much deeper dive into that because that's one of those topics that's so fraught with misinformation and unvarnished and unbiased opinions that aren't based in fact. So I thought we'd start with Roy has an interesting observation, which is basically some guns have been ruined by lack of cleaning. But a lot of guns have been ruined by too much cleaning. And you want to talk about that, Roy?
Well, first of all, I have to put my toilet cleaning gear away. I thought we were talking about house cleaning today. And so I don't want Susie to yell at me because I've got the toilet bowl cleaner in my office here.
Wow.
So sorry, Susie. It's my fault. You know, as a real gunsmith's best friend, which is a hobby gunsmith, which is what I am. And the reason why they're a real gunsmith's best friend is they get to fix everything that we mess up. But over the years, I've seen a lot of guns come across my bench, and it's really obvious the ones that have been overloved by their owners. And the ones who really know how to do it, it's fine. In other words, they are well maintained, and there's no, over much wear on it. The bores aren't all flared out like a blunderbuss from the cleaning rod going in and out. But there's too many of them that I see, which are basically, they're worn out because of too much cleaning. You know, taking them apart, putting them back together, taking them apart, putting them back together, cleaning revolvers or even auto pistols from the muzzle. All that stuff really wears hard on them. So yes, you can be too nice to your guns.
Well, and those of us of a certain age, we were brought up that you fire one round through that gun, regardless of what it is. You got to break that thing down and give it a complete and thorough scrubbing.
Yeah, do not listen to a former Marine about whether or not you should clean your gun, okay? I love them dearly. Some of my best friends are Marines or former Marines. But as Brent says, one shot does not make a gun cleaning episode need to occur.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, Tom had something on our show about what do you do at the range?
I shoot a gun right after I clean it.
Yeah, for
so
good
then
reason.
The problem is then I have to clean it again. It's like a never-ending cycle. You know, I never get away from the range.
It's a twilight zone.
But seriously, I mean, that's the ultimate function check, right? And as you say, a couple of shots, even a magazine, isn't going to make it dirty and in need of another cleaning. So.
No, and I know, a lot of people want us to quantify it. Well, how many rounds do I have to shoot before I clean? And 37. I can't tell you. Yeah, I mean, should we just say that 37? If you shoot
26 and a half.
Rounds.
No, it's science.
Yeah, it's science. Yeah, right. I think it's more of a sense than anything. All three of us have shot guns hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times without cleaning, and they run fine, especially modern day guns. I took my Hellcat not too long ago. I shot about 350 rounds through it. No cleaning, no additional oiling, no anything. I just shot 350 rounds through it, and it ran 100%. And, I've got many, many, many experiences like that. And so the reality of it is if you go shoot 40 or 50 rounds at the range, unless you're shooting some really crappy range reloads and the inside of your gun looks like a mud pit, well, just kind of wipe it off really good, a couple squirts of oil, and you're back in business. The most important thing is make sure the chamber is clean and the breech face is clean. I mean, really, if you're going to do anything, just make sure they're clean.
Well, you can divide this up into a lot of different areas, but the one I typically think about is carry gun, because even if you somehow your hunting gun, you might lose a trophy there, but that's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. But a carry gun, you can lose a lot more than that. So, Tom, how often do you clean your carry guns?
Realistically, I mean, unless it's an unusual thing like a training event where I put a whole bunch of rounds through in a short period of time. Every several outings, there's a confession for you.
I want a specific number,
Tom. It's not
Tom.
even an exact schedule. I definitely do not break it down for a full cleaning every time I get back from the range, because most range trips, I'm bringing multiple things with me, so I'm not shooting 500 rounds through one particular carry gun, so to say. I'm shooting 50 or maybe 100 on a big day. So yeah, I clean it when it gets dirty.
Well, I tend to shoot about a magazine full a week through my carry guns, and which right now it tends to be a Hellcat and a LCP2 Ruger 380 in my pocket. And so every week, I step outside and I shoot about a magazine through, and that's usually slow fire, trigger press, sight picture, that kind of stuff, just to keep your ball rolling. But I don't do a breakdown clean, maybe once every 6 weeks, just because they shoot fine. Yeah. And actually, for those kind of guns, the breakdown and clean, I think, should be more for inspection than anything else. I mean, I look underneath the extractor to make sure there's nothing lodged in there. You make sure the chamber's clean. You make sure the breech face is clean. Is the firing pin hole smooth, or is it starting to, peen up a little bit or get any rough edges? You look at the springs, make sure nothing's broken. And because that's something people don't realize, a spring will actually break. I mean, I've disassembled semi-auto pistols, and they're the main spring, the recoil spring is in two pieces. And the gun was working, because they're kind of captured. But so that's the kind of things when you break your gun down to clean it, it's inspect it. And then if you want to clean it a little bit, that's okay too.
And, I think that's something that I focus on. I don't know what perception folks have of gun magazine editors, but unlike Roy, those of us who can't step out our back door and crank off as many rounds as we want, I have to make an effort to go to the range, so I don't go to the range every single week. So what I find, and since we're always testing different guns, the gun that I carry usually on a daily basis, and right now it's a Mossberg MC2C, I worry more about the cheeseburgers and the dust bunnies that collect on it when I don't shoot it. So I often remind myself when I'm taking it out of my waistband, I look at it, and if it's got a visual accumulation of FOD, foreign object and debris, I will break it down, clean it, lightly oil it again, just to make sure that Roy, you probably experienced this. Our carry guns as cops, they're on your hip, so they're exposed to the weather and everything everything else. Sometimes if you've not been very diligent in cleaning, you'll find some stuff that frightens you a little bit.
So drinking straws down the muzzle. That's another story. You know what, though? You're really right. I actually keep a little can of that spray air like you blow your computer keyboards off with. I keep a can of that on my dresser in my bedroom. And that because that's where you put your guns in your pockets and all that kind of stuff. And I do that pretty much all the time. I mean, before it goes in my pocket, I give it a quick blowout, nooks and crannies and get all those dust buffaloes off. I agree completely. There was a time when I was on the range and I was helping run a qualification shoot, and this guy came up, a cop came up, and we went to draw on the whistle and he couldn't get his gun out of his holster. And it was a break front holster. So those, they were pretty easy. It's no wonder we didn't all die in those days, but they're pretty easy to get the gun out. And so I came up and I said, what's wrong? He said, I can't get my gun out of my holster. This damn holster, piece of shit holster, right? And it's like, well, no, actually, I had to reach down behind him and I used the palm of my hand to strike the butt of his gun to get it to break out the front of the holster. He had been in the rain like 2 months before and had never taken his blued steel revolver out of his holster.
Wow.
And his holster was so worn, the spring that kept the clamshell closed was exposed through the leather. So his barrel had rusted to the spring. It's the gospel truth. And so don't be that guy, okay?
So you're saying he should have, that's an example of needing to clean it more frequently.
Yeah, or just look. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah. Another topic that we hear a lot of is solvents and oils. And Tom, you've got an interesting take, which might be a little bit of heresy. Tell me, what is the best oil?
Well, it needs to be fuchsia colored and taste like bubble gum, but really have more of a floral smell.
With a low carbon footprint.
According to the latest marketing hype, those seem to be really hot in the tactical crowd. All the ones that have those attributes. But
yes.
Actually, on this point, I've issued a challenge in the past. I read lots of stuff online and then gun reviews or oil and solvent reviews, and people say, "Oh my gosh, this is the greatest solvent ever." And I always stop and I think, how do you know that? You put it in and things were slippery. Is that the sum total of the evaluation? Because I think, and I'm going to make a bet here. I bet you I could follow on behind and replace most gun lubes with "I can't believe it's not butter." And the average gun user wouldn't know the difference and wouldn't experience any functional differences. I mean, if you're going to, if you put "I can't believe it's not butter" on your gun, go to the range and shoot 50 rounds, it's going to work, right?
You realize I have to do that now. You realize
exactly.
I think
that I have to go do that. Okay, I'll do that.
No, we just stumbled on something here. That is going to be a classic video.
Yes, alternate gun lubes.
But seriously, Brent, was it you saying, nobody's really qualified to fully evaluate a gun lube? I mean, we're talking years of testing in all kinds of controlled conditions and what happens at cold and heat, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can't slap it on one day or every few weeks and say, wow, this works great. My gun still runs. Well, Guess what? Most guns run with no oil.
Yeah.
So I can't believe it's not butter would be a huge improvement.
Only you would come up with that, but I love the idea, and I can't wait to see a video from Roy testing that very thesis.
Definitely going to do it. I'm going to use olive oil too. Afternoon. Yeah, I'm really using extra virgin olive oil. That's
there
important.
Well, that's a whole nother controversy, right?
Yep.
There are people that have done their own independent testing and figured out that gun oils that cost $900 per fraction of an ounce are really basically canola oil. So,
yeah,
or so the conspiracy theory goes. So I think you got to do some canola oil video.
I'm in. I have to say, I've been doing this for more than 35 years. I've been a writer of gun stuff, and I've had hundreds and hundreds of oils and solvents and greases come across my desk, and I can absolutely look people in the eye and tell them that I've really never had one that didn't do its job. I mean, but yes, will a lead removing solvent reliably remove copper? Not always, I mean, there are some specifics like that, but generally 3-in-1 oil that you buy to lubricate the sewing machine, you probably would not die if you use that the rest of your natural life. The only thing I can think of, though, there are some times, like if you're hunting in the Arctic with a bolt action rifle, you do have to be very careful about how you lube it, or as Tom says, how you don't lube it, because in those extremes, you will get some gumming up of conventional lubrications and stuff. But of course,
you wouldn't use the butter thing there. You'd have to go with a good essential oil.
It'd be the last one you ever did. Yeah. But I think that's where today's, there's all these, Tom, you were talking about them on the video that we did, and it's the spray on, sort of like silicone based lubes that they spray on, and then the transporting, solvent evaporates, and what's left is a slippery film. Yeah. And that actually works really good because it doesn't collect dust buffaloes and stuff like that.
It's in my range bag. That's my at the range. Something's not working quite right anymore. Blast it with Gun Medic, and we're up and running.
Yeah, I'd be curious to use it for other things too to see if it works. So
now there is one that
it's not what you're thinking.
There is one. I almost said something I'm not going to. There is one that a lot of people think is okay, and I absolutely do not. But WD-40, it's a great product, but I wouldn't use it on a firearm unless that was all you had lying around and you absolutely needed lubrication. But in my experience, especially the more inexpensive brands, and not necessarily the name brand one, they can turn gummy and gooky, and you don't know what's in there just because it says it's a light silicone based lubricant or whatever. Or actually, it's not silicone, it's fish oil, I believe, is the original WD-40, isn't it?
I think you might be right. And something to remember, that WD stands for water displacement, and it was the 40th solution that they tested, and that's where they got the name. And so it was really never meant to be a lubricant. It's a preservative. So wipe your gun off with it, and then that's okay. We did have problems with the motor cops used to spray their whole gun with WD-40 and because they were riding in the rain and stuff like that. And it really never caused a problem. There was one time, though, where on the range, one of these guys who'd been doing this for months and months and months, same 6 bullets, same gun, WD-40, it had crept into the cartridges, and while the gun still shot, the rounds were much less powerful. They were like poofing out the end of the barrel, so it had contaminated the powder. So, and of course, we all said, "Well, it's a motor cop. We don't want them to have real bullets anyway." So
he was poofing.
He was poofing along, While we're talking about that, can I say one thing? I did a pretty comprehensive test one time with WD-40 and primers, because everyone says, "Oh no, don't use WD-40 around your gun because it'll make the primers deactivate." I was never able to successfully to get a primer to not go off. I mean, I soaked them, let them set for days and days and days, and they all went poof. I mean, maybe they weren't quite as strong as they should have been, maybe, but it certainly didn't deactivate the primer. So
interesting to note. Well, I did want to circle back real quick, with I can't believe it's not butter and essential oils. What do you think? Maybe like lavender gun oil, that might be the next big thing, especially in our kinder, gentler society.
Well,
don't encourage it.
Yeah, we've done all the candies and gums so far.
That's true.
I mean, we really have. They're like bright green and bright pink, and they smell like bubble gum. So, I mean, that's old news. So I think maybe a floral
that might
trend is
some of the orange based ones. I just reviewed one the other day, and it's good stuff, but I found myself really liking the smell. It was kind of a combination of an orange orchard in bloom and toxic waste, and it was a very nice smell.
That is the problem with those orange based things, is that they're almost like yuck. Duluth Trading Company, who is about my favorite clothing store in the world, and they have a lot of manly stuff for manly men. and womanly stuff for womanly women too now. Well, they've got shower soap that you can buy, and one of the fragrances is called Naval Supremacy. And they have another one that's Buffalo Trace. And I have to say, the Buffalo Trace body soap kind of smells like Buffalo Trace bourbon, which is not a bad thing to have.
I was going to say,
like.
I'm going to have to get me some.
Yeah, if you solvent makers are listening, I think that would actually sell. Hoppe's
smells like manliness, right?
Well, Hoppe's had some air fresheners, like you hang from the rearview mirror. They had some of those, and I'd heard that they did a cologne, which I don't know if that was an April Fool's gag or not, but I love Hoppe's. That, boy, you talk about a smell that brings any guy our age back to your youth as a teenager and learning to clean your gun. And to me, that is probably the number one memory-evoking smell of all time.
See, I'm holding out for Hoppe's scratch and taste. That's what I'm waiting for. Stop.
Brent, can you cut his audio out so he can't talk anymore? Can I tell you a less than 1 minute story about SHOT Show? This was the late 80s when Hoppe's was still its own independent brand. And I was at the SHOT Show and I was walking around. And I smelled Hoppe's number 9 in the air. And I thought, oh, that smells. And that was the old days, when it could kill you, right? Because it was real solvent. And so I kind of followed my nose, and there was the Hoppe's booth. And there was a guy in the booth in a suit, and he had a bottle of Hoppe's, and he was sprinkling it around on the carpet in the booth. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm sprinkling Hoppe's on the booth. And I said, why? And I remember this forever. He looked at me and he said, it brought you, didn't it? Wow. It was great.
And what's funny is those carpets at the trade shows generally are rental carpets. So somebody at the adult video symposium or whatever, that something smells like gun solvent.
That's funny. Now, they did change the concoction. It's been a long time, I don't know, 20 years or something, but keep your eyes open. If you can score an early bottle of Hoppe's number 9, like at a garage sale or something, if you smell it and then you open a new bottle, while it smells sort of the same, they are definitely different. And I don't think I'm letting out any secrets here. The smell is essentially banana oil is what that's the base of the Hoppe's. And then when they add all the cancer-causing ingredients, that's what gave it the miraculous wonderfulness that we all love. I keep an old bottle of Hoppe's number 9 on my workbench just because when I'm working, I just take the cap off.
I'm not surprised. But, I've got a bottle like that I use for like a photo prop, and it's still got a little bit in it. As soon as we're done here, I'm going out to the garage and... so if
put it right up to your nostril and breathe deep, huh?
And then I'll be walking down the street.
Yeah, your brain, you'll go back in this time warp 30 years ago, because I promise you, it is different.
That's fine.
Oh, well.
So before we get off the gun oil thing, one other thing I wanted to mention, and this goes along with the idea of too much cleaning. We've all seen it. Old guns, the old shotgun, your Pappy shotgun, or the 22 you've had forever. Oil-soaked stocks. If they did wipe it down, they tended to, wet a rag with whatever oil they had. And that's actually a thing in gunsmithing when they're restoring guns, is they have to get the oil out of that stock using something like acetone. But that's a very common problem on old guns.
That's why if you get those old guns and they're stored upright, that's why the recoil pad's always rotted away, right? Because it's been on it. And then the oil from the receiver. So if you're serious about that, I've restored a lot of old military guns, which of course are just soaked with oil and cosmoline. The thing to do with it is take it outside and put it in the sunshine on some newspaper and spray it with oven cleaner. That like really volatile oven cleaner that you can't even, you're not supposed to breathe or anything, let that spray on, let that soak for a little while, and then you wipe it off, and do that maybe half a dozen times or so. And it will actually get that impregnated oil out of the stock. It's the most amazing thing.
This has turned into a cooking show.
I know. Yeah. And then put your canola oil on it after that.
Wow. So guys, going round robin, what is the one cleaning tip that you give, maybe especially to somebody that is a newer shooter and not quite been doing this for a long time? Tom, is there one thing that you tell folks to be looking for or avoid?
Can I answer your question with a question?
Of course, you're Tom.
And it is related to a cleaning tip. So, and you guys were talking about soap and manliness and all that a couple of minutes ago. Do you risk losing your man card if you use latex gloves when cleaning your guns? I'm talking about those gloves that are used for a certain type of medical exam. If you use those while cleaning, is that acceptable in this community?
I always do it now, and I didn't when I was a kid, and it's probably why I can't remember anything now.
I use Nitrile Gloves, which is different.
Yeah. That's the word I was looking for.
They're a little more impregnable, if I can say that word, to chemicals. No, when we'd have training, SWAT training or whatever, we'd all sit around with our gloves on. There's no harm, no foul, because you're looking at solvents, you're looking at lead, copper, mercury, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, it can get through your hands. And it's one of those things. It's a simple thing to do, so why wouldn't you do it? If you had to suit up and level a hazmat, that might be a little much. But just putting on a pair of gloves, and it keeps your cuticles looking outstanding because you don't get that gun crud under
now
them.
That I know it's socially acceptable, then that's my cleaning tip. Go get yourself a box of gloves at Walmart or wherever if you have to go in there. And I don't do it for the safety element. I'm just lazy because it takes me a half hour to wash my hands if I don't. So.
Well, while you're at Walmart, buy the biggest box of Q-tips you can find. Yeah. Because that's probably the most important tool for gun cleaning that I recommend to people. And I'm amazed at the people who don't do it. They don't use Q-tips.
Yep. So
Q-tips and a good old-fashioned roll of paper towels. You don't need to buy some, and I know our clients are going to hate me if I say this, but you don't really need to buy some $100 gun cleaning kit because half the things in there will be things you're never going to use. If you're cleaning just handguns, why buy a kit that has shotgun cleaning gear in it? So you really need a cleaning rod, aluminum, because not aluminum. You want a steel rod. Aluminum will allow grit to get embedded in it. And then as you run it back in and out of the bore, you've got a sanding board, basically, so you want a hard steel cleaning rod. Don't get one that's vinyl covered because the vinyl does the same thing. And then buy about 2 or 3 dozen brushes, bronze bore brushes to fit your gun. The stainless ones have specialized uses, and stainless will wear rifle bores, because rifle bores are actually, and pistol bores are pretty soft. I mean, they're like Rockwell 40. They're pretty soft, and a lot of patches, and then go to work.
Yep.
Hey, a lot of patches is key, and I learned that lesson from a seminar on mopping floors. Yeah, it's too long a story for here, but in another life, a guy stood up and he said the most ridiculous thing he sees. He was a professional cleaner. He owned a giant janitorial company, and he said people go around with a mop bucket and they stick the mop in, they swish it around on the floor, they strain it back out in the bucket, they do it again, and all they're doing is moving dirty water around. He said if you're going to buy a mop bucket, buy a 2-parter. And what does that have to do with cleaning patches? Get lots of them. I back when I first started shooting, I used to use just a grungy old T-shirt for everything, and over time it became mostly dark brown from oil and dirt and all that, and I kept using it. And one day it occurred to me, patches are cheap. I use lots of clean patches to actually remove the dirt and relocate it elsewhere these days.
Yep. And that goes along with my tip, which is take your time, because when you're running that patch through your rifle bore and it's still dirty and that's good enough, if you're going to clean it, take the time, take the extra 5 minutes and really get it clean. There's a time just to wipe your gun down and get going what you're doing. But if you're actually taking the time to clean a gun, especially if you're going to detail strip it and really get in there, do it when you're not in a hurry, when you're not in a rush, because if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. So I always tell folks, if you think it'll take 15, give yourself 30, and then enjoy the experience of being one with your gun.
About the cleaning patches, though, you guys are exactly right. The old-fashioned a jag on the end that has a slot in it, and you're supposed to put a patch through it and then pull it back and forth through your gun. Well, that's a perfect analogy of Tom's dirty water bucket. You push through, and then when you pull it back, now you're dragging all that dirt back into the bore of the gun, and then, back and forth. So what I like to use are the jags that are just basically a little pointy end, and then you put the patch over it, then push it through the bore and out the muzzle, and then it drops off. And that's it. You're done now. I mean, if it's not real filthy, you can turn that patch over and then use the backside of it, for the next pass. But yeah, buy those by the 1,000 bulk, or pay your 8-year-old kid to cut up all your old T-shirts or something. So, don't be cheap.
Well, another tip I was just thinking of when you were talking, Roy, was the saga of the bag gun. The gun that comes in, that it's got all these parts, and the shooter hands it to the gunsmith and goes, can you put this back together? If you don't know what you're doing, don't just start taking stuff apart, because odds are you can get it apart. Putting it back together is going to prove to be the challenge.
That's the rub. Yeah.
So why is it always easier to take it apart? It's like a law of nature.
Sometimes it's not, though, because I've seen my share of guns with, peened over edges where some idiots tried to take it apart using a mallet. Well, it wouldn't come off. It's like, well, you didn't take the pin out that you had to take out before you started to pound the slide off. You moron. Wow. Are we allowed to say moron like that?
Well, you already said one of the big 7 words, so I guess moron's okay.
I forgot about that. Sorry.
You kind of just touched on something I wanted to come back to from earlier. You said one of the risks is damaging from cleaning too much. I mean, over the years, what are some of the kind of things you've seen? Like what kind of stuff is particularly risky from taking apart and putting back together and cleaning too vigorously, too frequently? You know what I mean? Clearly the muzzle, right?
Yeah.
Is one of those things.
Yeah, cleaning a revolver from the muzzle is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's the only way you can do it generally. Just use some caution. They make a little a muzzle guard or guide, and so it's a tapered cone, and it keeps the cleaning rod centered in the bore. I don't think it's a real critical thing. I mean, I've seen some guns that were visibly worn at the muzzle like that still shot fine. But I think using some common sense helps a little bit. The biggest problem I've seen are people who they just take their gun apart and put it back together thousands of times. And every time you do that, you're inducing wear. So you're wearing the sharp edges, you're wearing the tolerances between the pieces. And the guns were made to move when they're assembled. So that's how the camming surfaces are supposed. They're designed to all work like that. So now as you start to take things apart, you're introducing different angles and different kinds of torques and wear that the gun's not really designed for. And I said this on the video we made. We had Remington 870 shotguns on the police department. And part of the protocol at the time was that when you went to your car, you took the shotgun out, took it apart, took the barrel off, performed a safety check on it, and then reassembled it and reloaded it. And what we found out was that within about 1.5 or 2 years, all these guns needed rebuilt. All the little detent springs were worn out. All the locking lugs and the bolts were getting peened and worn. And it was simply from being taken apart, put back together too many times. And then the other thing, though, is that, like, as Brent said, if you don't know what you're doing, that's when you can damage your gun, too, taking it apart or putting it back together. Famous for that are Ruger Standard Auto 22 pistols. Everybody can take one apart. The old ones. Yeah. Then that's where the problems happen. I've put a gazillion of those back together again. The Berger gun thing, So,
I had to sidebar. I was laughing when you were talking about the 870. Your agency was very progressive in making sure guys, clean and check their shotguns, because most other places, if that shotgun was in a rack, It's hard telling. Definitely there'd be a cigar or some cigarette ashes down there. And feminine hygiene items, I've heard of those being in there. It's hard telling. And that's, so it seemed like there was two extremes. Yours or the one where it came out once a year for qualification. And, you didn't want to be the first one to shoot it because Lord only knows what was going to come out that end.
One time I pulled a shotgun out to do the breakdown clean test, and I unscrewed the lock nut, and as I pulled the barrel out, about 2 handfuls of what are those sunflower seed shells came out.
Wow.
And so this idiot had been driving around, probably the passenger officer, because the shotgun was mounted at his knees, and he was eating sunflower seeds. And for some reason, so he didn't get them all over the floor, I guess, he decided putting them down the muzzle of the shotgun was a really good idea. I like to think he forgot to empty them out afterwards, but truth.
Can you imagine that autopsy on the bad guy? Well, we found 9, triple-aught pellets and a bunch of sunflower seed hulls.
Wouldn't that be a big cloud of sunflower seed shells come flying out the muzzle, I'd like to talk about gun greases, though, if you don't mind. And this is one day to put a couple of myths to bed, and that is that you have to have some miracle magic grease. And I don't think you do. I mean, I've used everything from automotive grease to the grease I use for my tractor. I've tried everything, and nothing really seems to be any better than anything else. Maybe at the molecular level, one is arguably better than another one, but I don't think any of us would ever see the difference. The biggest thing that I've seen is that I like to use the clearer greases. And so what's on my workbench is something I buy at the auto parts store. It's a synthetic clear grease, and I like it because it doesn't make things black. It doesn't get all over everything, and it stays put. And if you buy a tube of it, you've just bought enough grease for the rest of your natural life. So
actually, that kind of brings up a good question. It comes up a lot. Motor oil. I see this all the time. It's like, who needs to spend $900 on a 1 ounce tube of gun lubricant when you could just use motor oil?
Well, and there's a group that believes in transmission fluid also.
Yeah. I think the only reason people buy gun oil is because it's convenient and it comes in a little applicator thing, but you're right. So just buy a quart of Mobil 1. I've used Mobil 1. I was curious. It works beautifully. And just put it in some little 10-cent squeeze bottle tube you buy at Hobby Lobby or something. And there, you're right. You're exactly right. I don't see any problem with that at all.
Well, I don't know if I was promoting being a proponent of that method. I was just raising the question. So,
well, I like the idea of any
problems.
I like the idea of Mobil 1 advertising in our magazine. So if any of you oil company executives are out there, we would be happy to take your money.
I'll tell you what, this is going to be the truth about this now, is that if somebody, took a container of motor oil, good quality motor oil, and repackaged it in little bottles and put Zappo Zowie miracle gun cleaning, lubricant or something, well, people would buy it. And then everyone on the internet, on the forums, would say that they bought this really hot new gun lube and it was better than anything else out there ever. And if you then told them that, no, actually you bought motor oil, they would all want to fight with you and tell you you're an idiot and you don't know anything. So, it is a triumph of marketing over practicality at some levels. I think, though, to give the manufacturers credit where credit is due, what they have done is the same thing we do in the magazines, is that they've done their research, they've vetted their product, they've tested it correctly, and so they know that it will work. In other words, so when you buy Hoppe's lubricant, that this has been well vetted. It's been developed in a lab that's made to develop these kind of things. And so you can use it with confidence. Whereas if you do use motor oil, you're kind of, you're going out on your own there. So it does pay to buy quality vetted products.
And it's not like you use the stuff by the gallon. I mean, I don't know that I've ever run out of, probably because I have such a variety sitting on the shelf. I don't know if I've ever run out of a gun oil before. It's pretty hard to do, Well, that speaks to the great canola oil controversy of a couple years ago. And I'm going to be very careful not to mention any names, because there were individuals who did testing and companies who sold, high-end gun lubricants for a lot of money, and lots of lawsuits entailed when individuals went and hired their own gas chromatography labs to analyze what's in some of this stuff. And their position was it's canola oil. And the company's position was obviously, no, that's not true. Who's right? I don't know, but just goes to show you, you never know.
The final point I wanted to hit today, and this is a perfect time for it, and this is a semi-controversial subject, but lubricating at all. Now, we've made it clear that AR platforms, the old saying is they'll run dirty, but they won't run dry. So I always make sure my AR platforms are just dripping gushy. But if we're talking defensive handguns, what we did, especially in colder weather, was we ran our guns dry. Now, if we went to the range, we, lubricated rails and bushings and things like that. But in our carry guns, I was more worried about collecting the dust bunnies and cheeseburgers, or the oil slickening. Not slickening. I was just laughing at Tom laughing.
Every time you say cheeseburgers, I'm like, I'm not sure I've heard that term for.
Well, where do you think the crumbs came from? But no, we always ran our duty guns dry with the idea that the oil wouldn't collect any of that gunk and maybe induce a malfunction. So do you guys agree or disagree with that philosophy?
I'll leap in. I think it depends on the platform. There are times when a well-fitted 1911 will run dry for a while, but I wouldn't trust it to.
That's a good point. We didn't carry 1911s at that point. We were carrying Glocks and things like that.
Any kind of stainless steel-based gun, I absolutely would use a stainless steel. Actually, that's a very good point, because there are lubricants that are specifically designed for stainless steel. And because they tend to gall, they do have some real needs. And so I would use good quality grease probably on a stainless steel gun. So, unless I was going to be in sub-zero Arctic temperatures, and even then I would tend to want to use some silicon-based dry lube, just because I always tell people, hey, help it a little bit. You're asking it to do a lot. People counter and say, hey, your defensive gun's only going to have to shoot a half a dozen rounds or something, which is true. Well, then you really want those to be the most reliable you can. So I don't know that I would go out and say, shoot your gun dry. I would always lube it. Yeah.
I use in situations like that where I'm worried about, gunking up and cold or whatever, I use lubes like Gunzilla, is one I've used from fairly frequently over the years, because it dries. You apply it and it leaves a dry, non-oily, non-sticky surface after the fact. And as Roy just said, you're giving it some help. So there are options out there that are kind of a meet in the middle compromise.
Well, your Robar they still do NP3 and NP3 Plus, and it actually has a natural, and I don't know how to say this, lubricity. Is that how you say that? I don't know how to say that. But it's got Teflon built into it. And I will say this, if you have a gun that has MP3 on it, that you don't need to lubricate it. It runs fine. As a matter of fact, it's so slippery, it's often hard to run the slide because you can't hang on to the slide. So sorry to interrupt, Brent, but go ahead.
Well, I was just going to point out, now, I'm sure my friends up in Idaho or Minnesota are going to laugh at me, but what do you guys know about cold? Okay. Of course, Roy, you will point out this year, you guys got actually colder than we did a couple of days. But every year we see 20 below for at least a day or two, here in the upper Midwest.
We got down into the 60s last week.
Oh, my goodness.
I know quite a bit about cold. Thank you very much.
Well, you've got that humidity that, you see small fish flying through the air in July. But no, you guys got really cold there, Roy, for a while, which is pretty rare. You're about the latitude of about Nashville, Tennessee, or thereabouts.
Yeah, we were minus 20 and 25 for a few days.
That's crazy.
And I did that thing where you walk outside with a cup of water and throw it up in the air, and it did it. It immediately turned to ice. Yeah. I just went, holy crap, what am I doing outside? And I ran back inside. No, that was some serious cold. But see, I could see if you were carrying a long gun exposed to the weather, then you'd have to do everything you could to get it to function and to not, have congealed lube. That happens with hunters all the time. You get some guy with a bolt gun and he's got a nice oiled up bolt And now he's 8,000 feet up in the Rockies on his elk hunt, and it's minus 10 degrees. And he pulls the trigger and nothing happens, and it's because the lube has congealed in the bolt and it won't let the striker move forward. So, so there is that reality. And then, that's a time when, like Brent, when you say maybe a no lube or a dry lube would certainly make better sense.
And maybe a butter-based lubricant would do it.
I can't believe it's not butter.
Well, real butter freezes, but I think I can't believe it's not butter. I think it might stay soft in the freezer. Roy, you might have to include that in your video.
We use that.
Test.
You can take it out of the freezer and it's still kind of spreadable. Yeah.
Wow.
We're going to find out. Yeah.
Well, and again, I'm thinking of business development here. If anybody with the I can't believe it's not butter people, I don't know who that is, we'd be happy to take your advertising at our magazines.
God, isn't it time to end this?
It is. It really is. So once again, we've gone off the rails. We're talking about stupid stuff. But, hey, that's what's fun here with the Guncranks. So in a month or so, at the end of next month, which was April, I can't even remember what day it was. At the end of next month in April, we'll do another one of these little get-togethers, and I'll tease something. I hope we have some big news from the Guncranks here very shortly, but that's all I can say, so stay tuned. So, gentlemen, Roy Huntington and Tom McHale, as always, thanks for taking my phone call, even though it goes way sideways and way off the rails, but it's a hoot, so I appreciate it.
A lot of fun. Right.
But my caller ID wasn't working, so I can't say it was intentional. But I guess it worked out.
Bye-bye, you guys.
Hope you had as much fun as we did in this episode, and make sure to check us out at the end of April for our monthly Guncranks reunion. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even those liberals. Guns Magazine was first in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions or comments about the show, please email me. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast catcher, YouTube, and, of course, at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publication, American Handgunner Magazine, at americanhandgunner.com. We'd also appreciate it if you'd share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. And finally, I'd like to remind you to check out our sponsor, the guys and gals who really know accuracy at Berger Bullets. Learn more at bergerbullets.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent T. Now get out there and get shooting.